Hello everybody, Raven Knight here, and welcome to a brand new Bible study series. We are done with Romans, guys, and let me tell you, I had so much fun going through Romans. I hope you guys did too. And for those of you who are brand new and don't know about my Bible study series, if you want to take a look at the Romans series and kind of get a feel for what we do here and what this Bible study stuff is all about, go check that out. There is a playlist for it. But today, moving on to our next topic, we're going to be moving on to a brand new Bible study series where we go through the life of King David. Now, some of you may be familiar with the name. You might know David. You might have heard it before. I'm sure you've probably heard of David and Goliath, you know, the story of the little shepherd boy who defeated the giant with the sling and stone. If you know that story or are at all familiar with it, yes, we are talking about that David, but you might not know all that much about David. There's a lot about David that a lot of people don't know. Even Christians don't know, and today we're going to go through his life and we're going to talk all about him. Now, you might be thinking, you know, Raven, it's an interesting thing to talk about. David's an Old Testament guy, isn't he? Yes, he is. And he's not Jesus. He's not the most important guy in the Bible, is he? No, he's not. So why do we want to take a look at David? Why is he so important? Guys, I'm going to tell you all a little something about David. Today, what we're going to do in this video is we're going to introduce you to David. I want to give you an idea of what kind of man David was and why he's so important to talk about. First of all, this guy has a lot written about him in the Bible. In fact, there is more mention of David in the Bible than any other figure. That includes Moses and that includes Jesus. There are 66 books in the Bible dedicated to David. And in the New Testament, he is mentioned 59 times. That's right. David is mentioned 59 times in the New Testament, and there are 66 chapters of the Bible about him. This guy's talked about a lot. But do you want to know one of the most fascinating things about David, one of the coolest things about David? He was called a man after God's own heart. No one else in the Bible can claim that moniker. No one else can be called a man after God's own heart. That is high praise indeed. And you know what? He deserves it. He really does. Because if you look at who David was and you think about what he was, he has a list, okay? He was a shepherd, but a lot of people know that. You know, he was a shepherd, and we'll talk about that. He was also a poet and a songwriter and a singer and an instrumentalist. He was known for playing the harp. That was his favorite instrument. And he played it for King Saul while he was still a young man. He was a giant killer. That's right. He was the only one to go up and fight Goliath and win single-handedly. He was a king. He was a warrior king. He went to war. David didn't just fight Goliath. He went on wars and battles for Israel many, many times. In fact, there was a chant about him that went on, Saul has slayed his thousands, but David his tens of thousands. David was a warrior, man. He was also an ancestor of Jesus. If you go to Acts chapter 13, verse 22, it says that David was an ancestor of Jesus. Jesus was from the house of David. Isn't that crazy? This guy is pretty stinking important, right? Those are all some good traits. He was one of the greatest men in the Old Testament, bar none. But here's something you may not know about David. There's more to the list. David was also a betrayer. He was a liar. He was an adulterer. And he was a murderer. Yeah. Now that part shocks you, doesn't it? Because that first part of the list that we read, those are qualities we might all like to have. They sound like things that would be about a man after God's own heart, right? But those second ones, that second group, really? Like, that's a guy after God's own heart who did all those things? Look, here's the thing. The Bible does not make any effort to hide David's failures. In fact, there are whole chapters of the Bible that talk about David's failures, and a large part of 2 Samuel is all about the consequences of David's screw-ups. But he is remembered and respected, not for his screw-ups, but for his heart for God. Now think about this. How do we become men and women after God's own heart? How can we be like David? And you might think, well, maybe I don't want to be like David. He sounds like he didn't do a lot of good things. But here's the thing. The flaws that David had helped formulate the man he was. Faith and flaws. As we go through the life of David, we're going to be talking all about David's faith and also his flaws. We're going to talk about all the stuff that went on in David's life. We're going to talk about his successes, because he had them, but we're also going to talk about his mistakes. We're going to talk about the qualities that made this man, and also what it was about him as he approached his flaws and his mistakes that stand out. Because I'm going to be honest with you guys, I have flaws, big flaws. And I'm going to make a bet you have them too. And one of the biggest problems that I have is knowing how to deal with my flaws. How do I approach these flaws and mistakes that I make? I'm not perfect. I make mistakes all the time. So how do I approach them? How do I deal with them? Maybe David has something we can learn. If there's one thing that I want to tell you guys in this video now before we get into the big stuff, is that David, more than anything else, had an unchangeable belief in the faithful and forgiving nature of God. He was a man who lived with great zest. He sinned many times, yes, but he was quick to confess his sins, and his confessions were from the heart, and his repentance was genuine. David never took God's forgiveness lightly or his blessings for granted. And in return for this, God never held back from David either his forgiveness or the consequences of his actions. So David experienced the joy of forgiveness even when he had to suffer the consequences of his sins. We're going to be taking a look at some of the Psalms that David wrote. Yeah, did you know that? David wrote some of the Psalms. And we're going to take a look at some of those, and we're going to see how they relate to David's life and how they can relate to us. There's so much I want to talk about. I'm so excited. But one thing that I think we all need to understand about David is this. He was a man who was after God's own heart, as described about him in Acts 13:22. A man after my own heart, God calls him. A man chosen specifically by God. You want to know something kind of interesting? The first king of Israel was King Saul. And the people of Israel demanded a king. They wanted a king so bad. They said, we got to have a king. And God warned them, you don't want a king. Do you know what a king's going to do to you? He's going to send you to wars. He's going to make you suffer. He's going to make you build idols. He's going to turn your people into slave labor. A king is going to do nothing good for you. I am your king. Please don't do this. But the people said, nah, God, we still want a king. We want to be like everyone else. We want a king for our nation. And God said, okay, if that's what you want. So he told his prophet, Samuel, go to this town, and we're going to give them the kind of king that they want. And he found Saul, and God said, anoint him. And so Saul became the first king, but Saul was an arrogant piece of work. Saul was all about his own power, his own privilege, his own prestige, and eventually God said, I reject you as king, Saul. And he told Samuel, now, I'm going to pick the next one. And he picked David. So next time we join, and I know this was really short, but I just wanted to give you guys kind of an introduction to what we're going to be dealing with. We're going to be talking about how God chose David and what we can learn from just that choice. Guys, I'm so excited. We're going to jump right into the heart of things next Sunday. I am so excited. I hope you're excited. This is going to be great. Genuinely, I've been wanting to do this for a while. David's one of my favorite figures in the Bible. He's going to be an awesome figure to study. Let me know down in the comment section below. I'd love your input. What are you most curious about when it comes to David? What do you want to learn about? What were you surprised to learn about? What do you already know about him? Let me know down in the comment section below your thoughts, concerns, and questions about David, because we may address some, if not all of them, as we go through this series. This is going to be a lot of fun, guys. I'm looking forward to it. I hope you are too. And I will see you in my next video. Take care.